Look at how we can use some basic formatting tips to start to wrangle our spreadsheets. It helps our users and us to better understand what we're looking at. Excel can be super unwieldy because we open up a spreadsheet like this. This is a public data set from the state of New Jersey. It's property tax data for 2022. So there's lots of rows here, about 565, and there's lots of columns. And I can very easily get lost because as soon as I start to scroll down, I lose my headers. Notice this hashtag here. That is because the number's too big. We can always do the following. Bring your cursor up between the D and the E, double click, and it will just automatically make these big enough. If I want to not have to go through and do every single column, what I can do is I can highlight, black down arrow above the column, click, highlight all of these columns all at once, come up to one of the columns that's highlighted, double click, and what you're going to see is all the columns will adjust to automatically fit all the data. Okay, so now I know I'm going to fit all my data. I can now see everything. I've got a top header up here, and I've also got a second header here. Notice how I've got some column headers that are cutting off here. And ultimately what's happening here is the column isn't wide enough. So how can we deal with this? Okay, first of all, let's start to set the table, and I have a whole separate video on setting the table, but I'm going to run through these steps pretty quick. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to note what data do I want to always see all the time. I want to be able to see these first two columns and these first two rows all the time. So let me actually highlight those in yellow for purposes of right now for this screen share. So it's clear what I want to always see. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my cursor in the cell that's closest to both of these yellow ranges. And then I'm going to go up to View, and then I'm going to do Freeze Panes. And what I've just done is I've frozen the yellow panes so that my columns A and B and my row 1 and 2 will always be visible. So that's step one. Next, I want to be able to see all of these column headers. If you can't see your headers, you're going to have a difficult time being as efficient as you can be. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to highlight all of row 2 by hovering over the number 2. Then I'm going to come up to the home menu and I'm going to choose Wrap Text. And what that does is it wraps my cells such that I can see all of the values. So you can see taxable property value is now in a wrapped format, and the row itself gets a little bit wider. Now the other thing I can do, I know that I have these 5 columns which are all part of the same grouping. I'm going to make this orange just for purposes. Actually, I don't like that orange. Let me make it pink. So I know that these columns all relate to total property taxes. So one way to think about this is a header and these are subheaders. Well, I want to be able to very clearly show that total property taxes relates to all these. And I don't want to have to do something like this where, oh my goodness, I'm having to kind of space forward and I finally get this view where it's centered. That doesn't look good if I have to come in at some point and do that. Like I want this to be automatically centered above these 5 columns. And here's how I can do that. I'm going to select the cells that I know are going to be part of my header, and I'm going to choose Merge and Center. And that just takes care of that. So now when I click in here, I've got one merge cell, and then I've got these 5 cells underneath it. Now, it's important to note, you can always unmerge by doing that. It's a simple toggle. It's like a light switch, on, off, on, off. And if you get used to it, you can end up doing this pretty quickly. I'm just going to kind of illustrate. Now, I have a familiarity with this data, so I am working on this pretty rapidly. What I'm going to do here is I'm also going to color these pink. And now also what I want to do is, let's imagine that I want to create some borders around all of the cells at once. I can come up here to the northwest corner of the spreadsheet between the A and the 1, and I'm going to click, and it highlights the entire worksheet. Now, I'm going to get rid of my yellow cells because I no longer need those. I'm going to do no fill. And now I've gotten rid of all of my formatting. I can come up here and I can say, okay, I want to have all borders have a black line. But then I look at that and I'm like, you know what, that's a little bit too stark. Maybe I want to have actually a soft dotted line. Maybe this version. So I'm going to go to my line style and I'm going to go back up here. And now, if you notice, I've got slightly softer line style. Even that's not good enough because I don't want the line color to be black. I want it to be, let's say, blue. So I come back over here, I change my line style to blue, I come back, I reapply the border styles, and now I have a blue header. So just understanding how to navigate this menu can be super helpful as you're formatting. One other thing I'll point out is if I go to the bottom of my spreadsheet, notice that my borders apply to everything, every single cell in the spreadsheet. Well, what's going to happen here is I can either leave it as is, maybe that's what I want, or what I can do is the following. I'm going to get rid of my borders by just clicking on that northwest corner. I'm going to say no border. So let's imagine that I want to have a spreadsheet where I don't see any grid lines other than the data that I want to look at. What I can do is I can come to view and I can remove the grid lines. So now I have a nice clean sheet. But I do want to have this data have grid lines. So here's what we can do. I'm going to highlight the topmost corner of my spreadsheet, and I'm going to depress the Shift, Command, down arrow. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow me, down arrow, down arrow. It allows me to automatically select all 566 rows at once. And what the Control key is doing, so the Shift key and down arrow is going to do a select, Shift and down. But I don't want to have to do the down arrow 565 times, and that's why I'm going to depress the Command key in the Mac or the Control key on a Windows and the down arrow. The Control key or the Command key, that's like your express train. I lift up from the Control or Command, and I'm able to just do the local, meaning one row. Shift, Command, right, and I'm going to select everything to the right. And what Excel will do is it's going to stop wherever it sees a break in the cells. Okay, so there we go. I've just selected all of my cells by using Shift, Command, right arrow. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back up to Home. I've got some quick options here. I can also go into more borders here. And I have a lot more options here. So let's imagine I want a soft dotted line. I want to have the soft dotted line on the inside, but then let's imagine I want to have a dark line on the outside. And let's imagine that I want the fill to be maybe a soft orange, soft salmon color. Then I'm going to click OK. And you'll see I have a black border on the outside, soft grid lines on the inside, and the whole sheet is salmon colored. So this is just some quick tips. Happy to share any others that might be helpful. You can apply these tips to a large data set like this or to a small table. It really is just a matter of what you select and then the options that you apply.